I'm glad to have you here. Follow my story until the end and comment the city you're watching from. I love you so much I was lying on a hospital bed with an IV in my arm when the nurse handed me the phone. My knee replacement surgery had gone well enough, but the recovery was harder than expected. At 68, nothing heals as quickly as it once did, a cruel reality my doctor had warned me about, but one I wasn't fully prepared for. "Mrs. Cooper," Nurse Margaret Jenkins whispered, her kind eyes crinkling with concern. "Your son says it's urgent." I took the phone with shaking fingers, my heart racing. Had something happened to one of my grandchildren? My arthritis-stiffened joints ached as I brought the receiver to my ear. "Mom," Zachary's voice came through, casual as summer rain. "By the way, I'm getting married tomorrow. Oh, and your house and car sold. Later." The soft beeping of the machines behind me faded beneath the thundering of blood in my ears. The room tilted slightly. "I'm sorry," I said slowly. "What did you say?" He huffed, like I was wasting his time. "The house, the one in your name." "Yeah, handled it. We needed the money for the new place. And the car's gone too. I signed what I needed to." My mouth fell open. I wasn't even supposed to be taking calls yet, but the nurse had handed me the phone saying, "Your son said it's urgent." Oh, it was urgent. All right. He kept talking, his voice getting higher, defensive. "Don't freak out. You weren't going to drive again after that fender bender last fall, and the house just sat there with all those stairs you can barely manage. It's better this way. Don't make it a whole thing." I didn't respond. I couldn't. A wave of dizziness hit me so hard I nearly vomited, and then I laughed. I couldn't help it. The nurse poked her head in, alarmed, probably thinking I was stroking out. I waved her off. Zachary paused. "What's so funny?" I smiled into the phone, voice rasping like gravel. "You really think you sold my house?" Silence. "What?" he snapped. "You think you got it all?" I whispered, still smiling, heart pounding. "But you didn't read the fine print, baby." I hung up. The phone slipped from my fingers and landed on the thin hospital blanket. My hand trembled. I wasn't laughing anymore. I was shaking. He'd waited until I was at my weakest, still recovering from surgery, still uncertain if I'd even walk properly again. He hadn't visited once, not one damn time, but somehow found time to sell my home. And God knows how he got the paperwork past the notary. Power of attorney. That's what he must have done. Forged it, most likely. The worst part, I wasn't even surprised. A part of me, the part that remembered his slouched teenage posture and how he always dodged chores, had expected something like this. Just not this soon, not this sharp. But he'd made a mistake. A critical, fatal mistake. He didn't know about the title clause, the one I'd quietly added after my husband Robert passed, the one my lawyer had suggested back when I still had the strength to be paranoid. He thought he'd sold the land, the house, the history, the soul of our family, but all he really sold was a shell. And tomorrow he'd walk into his wedding thinking he owned the world. Let him. He'd find out soon enough who really held the deed. The nurse had to help calm me down. I think she thought I was delirious. I wasn't. I was furious and humiliated. She brought me ice chips and rubbed my shoulder. "Try to breathe slow," she whispered. "You've had a rough morning." "Rough?" I shook my head. My only child had sold everything I owned while I was unconscious. That's not rough. That's a back alley mugging in broad daylight, with a last name I gave him. I just nodded and let her fuss over me. My whole body was hot, vibrating with anger, but my voice stayed quiet because now I was thinking. I stared at the ceiling with its water-stained tiles, the same kind I'd seen in every hospital since they wheeled me in to deliver Zachary in 1976. My son hadn't always been this way. I remembered when Zachary was small, how he used to crawl into bed with Robert and me during thunderstorms, clutching his stuffed dinosaur, Mr. Chomps, he'd named it. How he'd bring me dandelions from the yard, so proud of his yellow bouquets, his chubby hands stained green from the stems. When did that sweet boy turn into this stranger? Maybe it started after Robert died. My husband's heart attack 7 years ago had hollowed us both out, but differently. I withdrew into grief. Zachary seemed to harden, become more distant. He's just processing, everyone said. But the distance grew. He'd moved to Chicago for work, called less frequently. When he did visit, it was brief Christmas mornings when he'd rush through presents before heading to his real celebration with friends. Thanksgiving dinners where he checked his watch between bites of turkey. Like spending time with his mother was some tedious obligation. And then there were the loans. First for his startup, which never started. Then for investments, which never returned. And finally for a down payment on a condo he couldn't afford. I'd helped with them all, dipping into the savings Robert and I had built over decades of careful planning, skipping vacations, buying used cars, stretching leftovers into creative new meals. "It's just temporary, Mom," he'd say. "I'll pay you back when things take off." But things never took off. And a year ago, when I finally said no to co-signing another loan, this one for a can't-miss opportunity in some cryptocurrency scheme I didn't understand, that's when everything truly changed. The calls stopped completely. No birthday text, no Christmas card, nothing, until 3 months ago, when he suddenly reappeared with a fiancée I'd never heard of. Olivia Reynolds. Tall, beautiful, ambitious, from a wealthy family apparently facing financial troubles. She looked at our modest house, the one Robert and I had paid off twice after his gambling phase in the 90s, with poorly disguised disdain. "It's quaint," she'd said, running a manicured finger along the kitchen counter we'd installed ourselves back in '87, Robert and I working side by side through a sweaty August weekend, laughing when we realized we'd measured wrong and had to start over. Zachary had changed around her, stood straighter, laughed louder, kept glancing at her for approval, like a schoolboy eager to impress. And that's when he first brought up the house. "Mom, you should consider downsizing," he'd said, Olivia nodding beside him. "This place is too much for you to manage alone." I'd looked around at the home where I'd raised my son, where Robert and I had celebrated 37 anniversaries, where every scratch in the hardwood had a story. "I managed just fine," I'd told him, even though my knees ached on the stairs and the yard work was getting harder each year. But the seed had been planted, and apparently it had grown into something monstrous. Now, lying in this hospital bed, I realized I'd missed the signs, the way he'd asked about my filing system, where I kept important documents, how he'd offered to organize my paperwork while I was recovering from a fall last year, the casual questions about my will, about the house's value in today's market. I closed my eyes. The betrayal wasn't just that he'd taken the house, it was that he'd planned it, meticulously, while pretending to care, like taking candy from a baby. Except I was no baby, and he was about to learn that the hard way. A year ago, I was sitting in my own living room, the scent of lemon polish still in the air from my morning cleaning. I'd always found comfort in housework, even after Robert passed away to maintain order when everything else felt chaotic. Zachary had stopped by unexpectedly, something that had become rare. He leaned forward on the sofa, his voice soft, concerned. "Mom, just put the house in my name temporarily. It'll help with the taxes." I'd just buried Robert a few years prior, my husband of 34 years, the man I fought beside and against for most of my adult life. The house felt like a mausoleum back then, silent and echoing without his booming laugh, his off-key singing in the shower, his habit of leaving half-finished crossword puzzles on every surface. Zachary hugged me. First time in months. A real hug. Not that sideways pat he'd started doing once he grew tall enough to loom over me. And I melted. "I just want to help, Mom," he said, pressing his hand over mine. "I want to take some of the weight off you." My heart broke all over again, but this time from something that felt like hope. He was back, my boy. The one I raised. I didn't see the fangs in that hug until much later. Because what he really wanted, what he was banking on, was my loneliness, my exhaustion, the part of me that wanted so badly to believe he'd changed. I signed the temporary deed transfer that week, only I didn't stop there. Something about the way he rushed it, the way he said no need to get a lawyer involved, That itch behind my ear didn't stop the same feeling I'd had when Robert told me his gambling days were over, just before I found casino receipts in his jacket pocket. So I did get a lawyer involved. Quietly. Samuel Goldstein had been Robert's lawyer for decades. A serious man with kind eyes behind thick glasses who'd helped us through Robert's gambling debts and the second mortgage. He reminded me of Spencer Tracy in those old movies Robert and I used to watch on TCM. Solid and trustworthy. "What happens if he tries to make this permanent?" I asked, sitting in Samuel's office a week after signing the papers with Zachary. I felt silly even voicing the concern. He was my son, after all. Samuel, bless his blunt little heart, didn't sugarcoat a thing. "He can't, not if we set up the trust the right way. You stay the primary owner, and we write in a clause that snaps everything back to you if anything shady happens." He looked at me over his glasses. "Want me to do it?" "Yes," I said. "Do it." I felt a little ridiculous back then, like I was preparing for war against my own blood. But now, I realized I wasn't being paranoid. I was seeing clearly for the first time in years. Because when people show you they're willing to exploit you once, it's not a question of if they'll do it again. It's when. And my when had just arrived. Eleanor Washington knew. She'd seen it coming before I had. Eleanor had been my friend for 40 years, ever since we were young mothers trading babysitting duties and coupon tips. She'd been there through Robert's worst gambling days, through Zachary's rebellious teens, through the quiet emptiness after Robert's funeral. She'd sat at my kitchen table 2 years ago, stirring her tea with unusual force. "Marilyn, don't be a fool. Make sure there's a backup deed." I remember laughing, brushing her off. "It's just a temporary name change for taxes." Eleanor had narrowed her eyes the way only old friends can, the way that said, "I've seen too much life to be fooled by this nonsense." Her brown skin creased around her eyes, the same way it did when she'd warned me about that shifty contractor who tried to charge me double for roof repairs. "No such thing. If it's in his name, even halfway, it's a door. One day, he might decide to close it on you." Her tone was calm but dead serious. So after she left, I called Samuel back, asked him what a backup deed was, had him walk me through it step by step. And I followed every word. I went further, too. I recorded my conversation with Zachary when he first brought up the deed, said it was just for clarity. He laughed and said, "Sure, go ahead." That recording was now on a flash drive in my lawyer's file, labeled with the date and timestamp. "Just put it in my name for a little while," he'd said. "I'd never do anything without talking to you first." He'd promised. "I just want to make sure you're taken care of." He'd claimed, well, I was, because I'd prepared. But that didn't mean it didn't hurt. I had pictured a different future once, a son who'd stand beside me as I aged, the way I'd stood beside my own mother in her final years, not behind me with a dagger. But wishes are dangerous things when you mistake them for facts. Still, I had what mattered: a deed, a clause, a friend who warned me, a lawyer who never asked why I didn't trust my son, just helped me set the locks in place. And now Zachary was standing in a house he thought belonged to him, planning a wedding with a view he didn't earn. Let him. I wasn't going to stop him. Not yet. Because some lessons don't land unless they hit you in front of a crowd. That evening, I finally called my lawyer from the hospital bed. Not the front desk phone, not a nurse's phone, but mine. Eleanor had dropped it off with a full charger and a kiss on my forehead. Samuel and I talked for over an hour. He walked me through every step again. Slow, careful, no assumptions. He'd learned to do that with me after Robert's estate got tangled in probate. I wasn't the type to nod and pretend I understood. I asked questions. I repeated things back. I didn't care if it made me seem slow. I wasn't. "So let me say it back to you," I told him. "Even if he used a forged or expired power of attorney, the clause we put in overrides it." "Correct," Samuel said, "because the moment he transferred title without your consent, it activated the revocation. You become sole owner again. And what about the buyer? The sale doesn't hold. It's clouded. They'll have to prove they didn't know it was fraudulent, which will be hard, especially if he represented himself as having full authority. And we have the timestamp trust, the backup deed, and the recording of him admitting it was temporary. Yes, all of it. I let that sink in, watching the IV drip steadily beside me, marking time like a metronome. You could press charges, he added, but it's your call. Fraud, elder abuse, forged document filings, all possible. I stared out the window at the lights in the distance. I could imagine Zachary sitting in my living room, feet on the coffee table I bought in 1987, talking to his fiancée about caterers or money. It would be easy to burn it all down. But easy isn't the same as right. I want to handle this smart, I said softly. Not just get revenge. I understand. I want peace. There was a pause on the line. Then he said, That's even rarer than justice. But we'll aim for both. I smiled at that. First real one in days. We discussed paperwork. Who would be served? What needed to be filed first? I told him I wanted to go in person to the title office once I was released. I wanted to see the name shift back under my own eyes. I wanted to feel the weight of the pen in my hand when I signed the papers. After we hung up, I didn't cry. Not like I thought I would. I just lay there, eyes open, watching the moonlight move across the ceiling, listening to the distant sounds of the hospital's squeaky cartwheels, muffled conversations at the nurse's station, the soft ping of monitors. There's something freeing about hearing your worst fear spoken out loud and knowing you've already done something about it. My son thought he was clever, that he'd stolen something I'd never get back, but all he really did was remind me of who I was before the grief, before the fatigue. I was a woman who planned, who listened, who prepared even when it hurt. And now I was a woman ready to get her house back. Dr. Rebecca Chen came in the next morning, clipboard in hand, her white coat crisp even at this early hour. She reminded me of my first boss back in 1973, no nonsense, but fair. How are we feeling today, Mrs. Cooper? She asked, checking my vitals. Better than expected, I said, and I meant it. Having a plan had given me strength. Your recovery is progressing well. I think we can talk about discharge in a few days, provided you have support at home. She looked at me over her glasses, much like Samuel had. Do you have someone who can help you? Your son. Perhaps, I almost laughed, but caught myself. My friend Eleanor has offered her spare room until I'm back on my feet. Dr. Chen nodded, making a note. Good. You'll need assistance with stairs, bathing, and transportation to physical therapy. The first few weeks are crucial for proper healing. As she spoke about recovery protocols and pain management, my mind was elsewhere, assembling pieces of my own puzzle. I needed to be physically strong enough for what was coming. No judge would take me seriously if I appeared frail or confused. Dr. Chen, I interrupted. I need to be able to walk into a government office unassisted within 2 weeks. Is that possible? She paused, studying me. With a cane, yes. Without, it's pushing it. May I ask why? Legal matters that can't wait, I said simply. She nodded slowly. Then we'll adjust your physical therapy accordingly, but don't push too hard. Recovery isn't a race. This one is, I muttered. After she left, I pulled out my phone again and called Eleanor. He did what? Eleanor's voice rose so high I had to hold the phone away from my ear. She had always been the more vocal of us two, quick to anger but equally quick to forgive. A fiery counterpoint to my quieter nature. I filled her in on everything: the call, the house, vow, the car, the wedding. That boy needs a good whack upside the head, she fumed. Want me to go over there right now? I'll give him a piece of my mind. At 70. I've got nothing to lose. No, I said firmly. We do this my way. Clean, legal, no drama. At least not yet. Fine, she huffed. But I'm getting your spare key from the flower pot and gathering important documents before he destroys them. Anything specific you need. I thought about it. The photo album from the hall closet, the blue one with the beach pictures. My jewelry box from the bedroom, the real one behind the Jane Austen books, not the decoy on the dresser, and my birth certificate in the fireproof box under the bed. Consider it done. Eleanor paused. He really thought he could get away with this, didn't he? He still does, I said. That's what makes this next part necessary, which is letting him walk right into the trap he set for himself. After we hung up, I requested a consultation with the hospital's social worker. I needed to cover all my bases, ensure that no one could claim I was making decisions under duress or medication. I needed witnesses to my lucidity, to my determination. The social worker, a young woman named Brenda Torres, took detailed notes as I explained my situation in careful, measured terms. I'm concerned about financial elder abuse, I told her. I'd like to document my current state of mind and decision-making capacity. Brenda's eyes widened slightly, but her voice remained professional. Of course, Mrs. Cooper, we can certainly help with that. Would you like me to arrange for a psychological evaluation as well? It would strengthen your case. Please, I said. As soon as possible. She nodded, making another note. And have you considered a temporary restraining order given the circumstances? It might be advisable. I thought about it. A restraining order would alert Zachary that I was fighting back. No, better to let him think he'd won. Not at this time, I said, but I appreciate the option. By the time lunch arrived, bland hospital chicken and overcooked vegetables that reminded me of school cafeterias circa 1965, I had a clear path forward. 1. Complete physical therapy with enough progress to walk with minimal assistance. 2. Obtain documentation of my mental competence. 3. Meet with Samuel to file the quiet title action. 4. Freeze any proceeds from the fraudulent sale. 5. Move temporarily to Eleanor's while the legal process unfolded, all without tipping my hand to Zachary. It wasn't about revenge. It was about justice. It was about standing up and saying, I am not invisible. I am not disposable. I am not done. As I picked at my lunch, my phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Got everything. Also, there's a for sale sign in your yard with sold plastered across it. Blood pressure rising. Resisting urge to vandalize. I smiled grimly. Let him advertise his crime. It would only make the fall more public. Another text came through. Wedding tomorrow at Lakeside Gardens. Small ceremony according to neighbor. Reception at your house after. The nerve. My hand tightened around the phone. Using my house for the reception without even telling me. That was a new low, even for him. But I forced myself to breathe. To think. This wasn't just about a house or a car. This was about a son who had decided his mother was nothing more than an obstacle, a resource to be drained, a life to be discarded. And that realization hurt more than the surgical incision in my knee ever could. But I wouldn't let that pain drive me. I wouldn't let it turn me bitter or vengeful. I would use it as fuel for the long road ahead, a road that led back to my home, my dignity, and perhaps, someday, to a reckoning that might finally teach my son the lesson I had apparently failed to instill. That family isn't something you use, it's something you honor. That mothers aren't possessions, they're people, and that some debts can never be repaid with money. As the afternoon light slanted through the hospital blinds, I closed my eyes and pictured my house, the peeling paint on the back porch, the creaky third step, the window in the kitchen that never quite closed all the way. It wasn't perfect, but it was mine, and soon it would be again. I just had to be patient. And that was something age had taught me well. The nurse came in with my evening medication, her smile sympathetic. Try to rest, Mrs. Cooper. Your body needs to heal. I nodded, accepting the small paper cup of pills. I will. But as I swallowed the medication, I knew that true healing wouldn't come from pharmaceuticals or physical therapy. It would come from reclaiming what was mine, and from knowing that I wasn't as helpless as my son believed. Not by a long shot. 10 days after my surgery, Eleanor wheeled me into her modest ranch-style home, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across her well-tended garden, my discharge papers crinkled in the bag hanging from the wheelchair handles. Home sweet home, she announced. At least until we get your real home back. The transition from hospital to Eleanor's had been a whirlwind of paperwork. Prescriptions and stern instructions from Dr. Chen about not pushing my recovery too hard. My knee still throbbed with each heartbeat. but the worst of the post-surgical pain had begun to subside. The guest room had been transformed. A hospital-grade bed replaced her usual antique four-poster. Handrails had been installed in the adjoining bathroom. My favorite throw blanket from my own living room, rescued during Eleanor's covert mission, lay folded at the foot of the bed. "You didn't have to do all this," I said, my voice catching. Eleanor snorted. "What else was I going to do? Take up skydiving. Now shut up and let me fuss over you." That was Eleanor practical love wrapped in no-nonsense packaging. We'd been through too much together to waste time on false modesty or polite protests. She helped me settle in, unpacking the few belongings I had from the hospital and arranging my medications on the nightstand. The pain in my knee throbbed steadily, a reminder of my physical vulnerability. But my mind felt sharper than it had in months. "How was the wedding?" I asked finally, when we were sitting in her sunny kitchen, mugs of tea steaming between us. Eleanor's mouth tightened. "Tacky. Rushed. The groom looked like he'd rather be anywhere else. And the bride, Olivia." Eleanor stirred her tea aggressively. All smiles, but calculating. I stayed in the back. Didn't introduce myself. Just wanted to see what we're dealing with. And I think she's the driving force behind all this. The way she kept pointing at things in your house during the reception, telling people her renovation plans, like she couldn't wait to tear it all down and start over. I nodded slowly. That matched the impression I'd formed during our brief meeting 3 months ago. "There's more," Eleanor said, setting down her spoon. "I did some digging. Her father, Marcus Reynolds, owns Reynolds Development Group. Used to be a big deal in commercial real estate. Used to be 3 failed projects in a row. Rumors of bankruptcy. Then suddenly, his daughter's marrying your son, and they've got cash for a lavish wedding. The pieces clicked together like a morbid puzzle. They needed my house," I murmured. "To bail out her father," Eleanor nodded grimly. "That's my guess. And Zachary?" "Wanted to impress his new in-laws," I finished. "Show he could deliver." My tea grew cold as we sat in silence, processing the depth of the betrayal. It wasn't just greed or convenience. It was calculated. A business transaction where my home, my life, was nothing but collateral. "What do we do now?" Eleanor asked finally. "We follow the plan," I said, reaching for my phone. "First step, find out exactly what's happening with the sale." I called Samuel, putting him on speaker. "Marilyn," he greeted me. "Good timing. I've been making inquiries. The deed transfer is already being processed, but there's good news. The trust mechanism we put in place has flagged it as disputed. No clean title can be transferred yet." "What about the money?" I asked. "Initial payment has been made to a joint account Zachary opened recently. We can freeze it with a court order, which I've already drafted. I just need your signature." "You'll have it tomorrow," I promised. "What about the buyers? Who are they?" Samuel hesitated. "That's where it gets interesting. The buyer is Reynolds Investment Trust." Eleanor and I exchanged looks. "As in Marcus Reynolds?" I asked. "The very same. It appears to be an internal transaction. Your son selling your house to his new father-in-law's company." My hand tightened around the phone. "So it never even hit the open market?" "No, and they severely undervalued it. Based on recent comparables in your neighborhood, they listed it at about 70% of market value. A quick under-the-table deal." The betrayal stung anew. Not only had he stolen my home, but he'd practically given it away to curry favor with his new in-laws. "Can we prove fraud?" I asked. "With what we have, absolutely. The expired power of attorney, the trust provisions, the recording of him admitting it was temporary, the undervalued sale, the family connection between buyer and seller. It's textbook." I took a deep breath. "Then let's do this right." After hanging up, Eleanor studied me across the table. "You're holding up better than I would be." I gave her a tired smile. "Don't mistake calm for peace. I'm furious, but I learned a long time ago that anger is only useful when it's focused. And my focus now was razor sharp." The next morning, I insisted on physical therapy exercises before Eleanor drove me to Samuel's office. Every bend of my knee sent pain shooting up my leg, but I pushed through. I needed strength for what was coming. At the law office, I signed papers until my hand cramped affidavits confirming I never authorized the sale, requests to freeze the proceeds, a formal fraud complaint, and the quiet title action that would ultimately restore my ownership. "This is just the beginning," Samuel warned. "It could get messy. Zachary will fight back when he realizes what's happening." "Let him," I said, signing the final document with a flourish. "I've been fighting longer than he's been alive." As we left, Samuel handed me a thick folder. "Copies of everything. And this," he added a smaller envelope, "is your new power of attorney, naming Eleanor as your agent, not Zachary. Keep it safe." In the car, Eleanor glanced at me. "You sure about this, making me your POA instead of your son?" "There's no one I trust more," I said simply. Her eyes glistened briefly before she blinked it away. "Well, good. Now let's go get your house back. But first, we had research to do." Back at Eleanor's, we sat at her dining room table with her laptop open between us. Social media would tell us what official channels couldn't. "Look at this," Eleanor said, turning the screen toward me. "Olivia's Instagram, all wedding photos and honeymoon pics from Cabo." I leaned forward, studying the images, my son in a white linen suit, looking tanned and satisfied, Olivia in a flowing beach dress, designer sunglasses perched on her perfect nose, champagne toasts at sunset. "Scroll down," I murmured. Eleanor did, and there it was, photos from the reception. In my house. My living room transformed with white flowers and fairy lights. Strangers sitting on my couch, drinking from crystal glasses that weren't mine. And one caption that made my blood boil. "First dinner in our new home. Can't wait to renovate this outdated space. #newlywed life #fresh start." Eleanor quickly closed the laptop when she saw my expression. That's enough research for today. But it wasn't. I needed to know everything, every detail, every plan, every lie they'd told. "I need to see the sale documents," I said. The exact wording Zachary used is, Eleanor hesitated. "Samuel said he'd get copies." "Not fast enough." I struggled to my feet, ignoring the pain. "We're going to the county clerk's office. Marilyn, be reasonable. You just got out of the hospital. And my son just sold my house out from under me. Which one of us is being unreasonable?" She sighed, but reached for her car keys. "Fine, but you're using the wheelchair." The county clerk's office was cold and sterile, fluorescent lights buzzing overhead. I sat in the wheelchair, Eleanor standing behind me, as the clerk searched for the records. "Cooper Residence, 1487 Maple Street," the clerk confirmed, placing a folder on the counter. "Sale recorded last week. You want copies?" "Please," I said, my voice steady despite the fury building inside me. The clerk made photocopies while I waited, hands folded in my lap, the picture of composure. But inside, I was a storm. When we got the documents, Eleanor wheeled me to a quiet corner where we could examine them. The first thing I noticed was the signature, a passable forgery of my name on the seller's line. The second was the price, $275,000 for a house worth at least $400,000 in the current market. And then I saw it. On the final page of the contract, seller confirms property is free of all liens and encumbrances and has clear title to convey. A blatant lie. The trust we'd established created an encumbrance that Zachary had deliberately concealed. "We've got him," I whispered. Eleanor squeezed my shoulder. "Let's get these to Samuel." On the drive back, my phone buzzed with a text. Unknown number. "Why are there people from the county at our house? What did you do?" "Olivia. It had to be." I didn't respond. Let her wonder. Let her worry. Let her start asking the questions she should have asked before the wedding. Like why her husband never mentioned his mother still owned the house they were living in. By the time we returned to Eleanor's, Samuel had news. "The funds are frozen," he confirmed over the phone. "All $275,000 sitting in limbo until the court rules. And I've filed an emergency motion to prevent any renovations or alterations to the property while ownership is in dispute." "Good," I said. "What's next?" "Preliminary hearing next week. Just procedural. But it would help if you could be there. Shows the judge you're serious and competent." "I'll be there," I promised. Even if Eleanor has to wheel me in, after hanging up, I leaned back in the recliner, suddenly exhausted. The adrenaline that had carried me through the day was fading, leaving behind bone-deep weariness and pain. Eleanor brought me a pain pill and a glass of water. "You did good today. Now rest." As I drifted off, I thought about my house not as property or investment, but as home. The place where I'd raised my son, loved my husband, built my life. The kitchen where I'd taught Zachary to make pancakes. The backyard where he'd learned to ride a bike. How could he sell those memories so easily? And why hadn't I seen this betrayal coming? The answers would have to wait. For now, I needed to heal, to gather strength, because the real battle was just beginning. 3 days later, I sat in Samuel's office again, this time reviewing the detailed legal strategy he'd prepared. The documents spread across his mahogany desk told a compelling story of fraud and elder abuse. "A quiet title action is our primary approach," Samuel explained, tapping a thick legal brief. "This is a legal procedure to establish ownership when there's a dispute. Given the evidence we have, it's strongly in your favor." "How long will it take?" I asked. "Typically several months. But given the circumstances, forged documents, expired power of attorney, the trust provisions we've requested expedited consideration, could be as quick as a few weeks." Eleanor, sitting beside me, frowned. "And in the meantime, they're living in her house." Samuel nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, yes. But they can't make any permanent changes. Can't sell it. Can't take out loans against it. The property is essentially frozen." "What about the car?" I asked. "That's trickier. Vehicle transfers are harder to reverse once completed, but since it was part of the same fraudulent scheme, we've included it in our filing. Best case, you get it back. Worst case, you receive compensation for its value." I nodded, processing this. The car was less important than the house, but the principle remained the same. It was mine, taken without permission. "What do we do about the money?" Eleanor asked. "The sale proceeds currently frozen," Samuel confirmed. "Neither Zachary nor the Reynolds family can access it. After the court rules, if we win, and I'm confident we will, those funds will be released back to the Reynolds Investment Trust, and your property returns to you." "And Zachary?" I asked quietly. "What happens to him?" Samuel removed his glasses, polishing them slowly. "That's entirely up to you, Marilyn. Legally, what he did constitutes fraud, forgery, and possibly elder abuse. Those are criminal charges that could result in jail time." My heart constricted. Despite everything, the thought of my son in prison made me physically ill. "Let's focus on getting the house back first," I said. "We can decide about criminal charges later." Samuel nodded, understanding in his eyes. "Of course, but you should be prepared once we file these papers. It becomes very public. The Reynolds family has connections. This could get ugly." "It already is ugly," I said. "I just want the truth to come out." After finalizing the paperwork, we headed to the county recorder's office to file the quiet title action officially. The clerk, a different one from our previous visit, stamped the documents with practiced efficiency. "Ownership dispute," she noted, barely looking up. "Property will be flagged in the system. No transfers or loans can be processed until resolution." "How will the current occupants be notified?" I asked. "Official notice will be mailed within 48 hours. They'll have 30 days to respond." 48 hours. In 2 days. Zachary would know I was fighting back. I felt strangely calm about that now. Our next stop was the bank where I'd conducted business for 40 years. Walter Thompson, the branch manager, greeted me with concern. "Mrs. Cooper, I was so sorry to hear about your surgery. How are you recovering?" "Well enough to ask some important questions," I replied. "I need to understand exactly what happened with my accounts recently." Walter's expression shifted subtly. "Let me pull up your information." He typed briefly, then frowned. "There was a significant withdrawal 3 weeks ago. Power of attorney authorization. May I see the documentation used?" I asked. He hesitated. "I'd need to check with legal first." "I understand. Please do that. In the meantime, I'd like to freeze all my remaining accounts immediately. His eyebrows rose. May I ask why? Because the power of attorney was expired, I said evenly. And I believe fraud has been committed. The color drained from Walter's face. I'll make those calls right away. Mrs. Cooper. As we left the bank, Eleanor squeezed my arm. You were magnificent in there. Didn't even raise your voice. I learned a long time ago that quiet authority works better than shouting, I said. Especially for women our age. Raise your voice, and you're a hysterical old lady. Speak calmly, and they have to listen, Eleanor laughed. Wisdom of the ages. That evening, we continued our research on the Reynolds family. With Eleanor's help, I navigated through business news articles and property records online. Look at this, Eleanor said, pointing to a news item from 6 months ago. Reynolds Development Group lost a major contract for a shopping center project. Stock dropped 40% in one day. And this, I added, finding a more recent article. Unexpected recovery. New capital investment. Sources close to the family indicate a strategic partnership. The timeline matched perfectly. Right around when Zachary started dating Olivia, her father's company began to stabilize. And now, with my house sold at below market value to their family trust, they had an asset they could leverage. They used him, I murmured. And he used me. Eleanor closed the laptop. Everybody using everybody. What a mess. Not everybody, I said, reaching for her hand. I have you, she smiled, squeezing my fingers. Damn right you do. That night, I couldn't sleep. I lay in the hospital bed Eleanor had rented for me, staring at the unfamiliar ceiling, thinking about my son. Where had I gone wrong? Had I been too lenient after Robert died, too generous with financial help when he struggled? Or had something broken in him long before, something I'd failed to notice or fix? The questions circled endlessly, with no satisfying answers. My phone buzzed on the nightstand, a text from an unknown number. This is Olivia Cooper. We need to talk. Tomorrow. Alone. I stared at the message, heart pounding. After all this time. Now she wanted to talk. I typed back, Eleanor's house, 2 p.m. The response came immediately. I'll be there. I set the phone down, wondering what this development meant. Was it a trap? An attempt at reconciliation? Or was Olivia starting to realize what kind of man she'd married tomorrow would tell? Morning brought a flurry of activity. Eleanor insisted on cleaning the already spotless house, muttering about rich girls with their judgmental eyes. I focused on my appearance, a modest navy dress, pearl earrings Robert had given me for our 30th anniversary, hair neatly styled. I wanted to look composed, dignified, not like a victim. At precisely 2 p.m., the doorbell rang. Eleanor answered, her voice carrying down the hall. She's in the living room. You have 30 minutes. I'll be in the kitchen. Olivia stepped into view, and I was struck by how different she looked from her wedding photos. Gone was the radiant bride. This woman appeared tense, her designer clothes slightly rumpled, dark circles visible beneath carefully applied makeup. Mrs. Cooper, she said stiffly. Thank you for seeing me. Please sit. I gestured to the armchair across from me. And it's Marilyn. She perched on the edge of the seat, her expensive handbag clutched like a shield. I'll get straight to the point. There are people from the county claiming there's a problem with our house. My house, I corrected gently. Her perfectly shaped eyebrows drew together. Zachary said you signed everything over, that you wanted to downsize. Did he show you those documents? Did you see my signature? She hesitated. Well, no, he handled all of that. And you never thought to ask why I wasn't at the wedding, why I wasn't consulted about using my home for the reception, why I was in the hospital while you were planning renovations. Olivia shifted uncomfortably. He said you were difficult, that you didn't approve of us, that it was better this way. I leaned forward, meeting her gaze directly. Olivia, I never signed anything. I never approved any sale. Zachary used an expired power of attorney and forged my signature while I was recovering from knee surgery. Her face paled. That's not possible. He wouldn't. He did. And now the sale is being investigated for fraud. The money is frozen. The title is in dispute. She stood abruptly, pacing across Eleanor's floral rug. No, this can't be happening. My father's company already incorporated the property into the development portfolio. We've started design plans for the renovation. The board meeting is next week. And there it was, confirmation of exactly what we suspected. Tell me something, Olivia, I said quietly. Did you marry my son because you loved him? Or because your family needed assets? She whirled to face me, anger flashing in her eyes. How dare you? Our relationship is none of your business. It became my business when you took my house, I replied evenly. When you planned to tear down the home where I raised my child, without even asking me. Her composure cracked slightly. It wasn't like that. Not at first. Zachary pursued me. He was persistent. Said he had family money, property. My father was impressed. And when did you discover that wasn't exactly true? She sank back into the chair, deflating visibly. After we were engaged, Dad did some digging, found out Zachary's business ventures were failures. But by then, she twisted her diamond ring anxiously. By then, Dad needed the property. His company was in trouble. Zachary promised he could deliver, said his mother was happy to help. And you believed him. Why wouldn't I? He's your son. The irony was almost too much. She'd trusted Zachary because he was my son, while he was actively betraying me. Where is he now? I asked. Chicago, business meeting. Her tone suggested she didn't entirely believe that. He left yesterday, after the county officials came. Said he'd handle it. I nodded, unsurprised. Zachary had always run from problems rather than facing them. What happens now? Olivia asked, her voice smaller. Now the legal process runs its course. The house returns to me. The money returns to your family's trust, and everyone has to face the consequences of their actions. Will you press charges against Zachary? The million-dollar question. One I still didn't have an answer to. That depends, I said carefully. On what happens next? Olivia stood, gathering her composure like a cloak. I should go. Before you do, I said. I want you to understand something. This isn't about money or property. Not really. It's about respect. About recognizing that I'm still a person, with rights and feelings. Something both you and my son seem to have forgotten. She paused at the door, not quite meeting my eyes. For what it's worth, I'm sorry. I didn't know, but you didn't ask either. I pointed out, you saw an old woman and assumed I was irrelevant. She had no response to that. After she left, Eleanor emerged from the kitchen. Well, what did little Miss Perfect have to say for herself? I recounted the conversation, watching Eleanor's expression shift from outrage to vindication. So the house was going into the Reynolds development portfolio, she mused. Probably to shore up their assets, make the company look more stable on paper. Using my home as a corporate prop, I said bitterly, without a second thought about what it meant to me. Eleanor sat beside me, taking my hand. What now, you think Zachary will come crawling back once he realizes his plan failed? I gazed out the window at the afternoon light. No, he'll lash out. Blame me. That's his pattern. When things go wrong, it's never his fault. And Olivia, she has decisions to make about what kind of person she wants to be, about whether her marriage is worth saving. And you? Eleanor asked softly. What decisions do you have to make? I thought about it, about criminal charges, about forgiveness, about the future of my relationship with my only child. One step at a time, I said finally. First, we get the house back. Then we see what's left to rebuild. Later that evening, Samuel called with an update. The hearing is scheduled for next Monday, he said. Just preliminary, but the judge will likely issue temporary orders regarding the property. Can you be there? I wouldn't miss it, I assured him. Good. And Marilyn, the official notices were delivered today, to both the property and to Zachary's email. He knows now. I took a deep breath. Thank you for telling me. After hanging up, I checked my phone. No calls, no texts, not from Zachary. But there was another message from Olivia. I found documents in his office, actual power of attorney papers with your signature. But the date looks strange. Altered, maybe? Should I bring them to you? I showed the message to Eleanor, who frowned. Could be a trap. Or she's starting to see the truth, I countered. We debated briefly before I responded, yes, but not here. Meet at Samuel Goldstein's office tomorrow, 10 a.m. I included the address. You think she'll show? Eleanor asked. I don't know. But if she does, it means she's choosing truth over loyalty to Zachary. And that's significant. That night, I dreamed of my house not as it was now, but as it had been when Zachary was small. His toys scattered across the living room floor, Robert's reading glasses on the side table, the smell of Sunday pot roast filling the kitchen. I woke with tears on my pillow, mourning not just the home I'd lost, but the family that had once filled it with love. Some things, once broken, can never be fully repaired. But I was determined to try. I arrived at Samuel's office 15 minutes early, Eleanor insisting on accompanying me despite my assurances that I'd be fine. We waited in the reception area, watching the clock tick closer to our appointment time. At 10:05, Samuel emerged from his office. No sign of her yet. I shook my head. Give her a few more minutes. By 10:15, we were beginning to assume she wouldn't show. Then the elevator doors opened, and Olivia stepped out, but she wasn't alone. Marcus Reynolds, her father, accompanied her. Tall, silver-haired, in an impeccable suit that probably cost more than a month of my mortgage payments. His expression was stern but controlled. Mrs. Cooper, he said, extending his hand. Marcus Reynolds, I believe we have some matters to discuss. Samuel stepped forward smoothly. Samuel Goldstein, Mrs. Cooper's attorney. Why don't we move this to the conference room? Once seated around the polished table, an uncomfortable silence fell. Olivia looked pale, her father impassive. Finally, Marcus spoke. My daughter showed me your text exchange and certain documents she found in my son-in-law's possession. He placed a folder on the table, sliding it toward Samuel. I believe these will interest you. Samuel opened it carefully, examining the contents. His eyebrows rose as he passed the documents to me. There was the power of attorney form I'd signed years ago after Robert's death, but the expiration date had clearly been altered. The 3 in 2023 modified to look like an 8 for 2028. A crude forgery, Samuel noted. And easily provable, since we have the original on file. Marcus nodded curtly. I suspected as much, Mrs. Cooper. I want to be clear, Reynolds Investment Trust entered into this transaction in good faith, believing the sale was legitimate. Had I known otherwise, you would have still wanted the property, I finished for him. Just through legitimate means. A flicker of surprise crossed his face, then a reluctant smile. Perhaps it's a valuable location, but I would have approached you directly, made a fair offer. The house isn't for sale, I said firmly. It never was. Olivia shifted uncomfortably. Dad, I told you, yes. He waved her off impatiently. Sentimental value, family home. I understand. But everyone has a price. Mrs. Cooper. Marcus, Samuel interjected. You're missing the point. Your son-in-law committed fraud. These documents prove it. The sale is void, and the funds will be returned to your trust. There's no negotiation to be had here. Marcus leaned back, studying me thoughtfully. And the criminal implications for Zachary. What are your intentions there? The million-dollar question again. Everyone wanted to know if I would send my only child to jail. That depends, I said slowly. On his next actions. On whether he takes responsibility or continues to deny what he's done. He's not answering my calls, Olivia said suddenly, her voice small. Since yesterday, his phone goes straight to voicemail. A cold feeling settled in my stomach. I knew that pattern too well. Have you checked your joint accounts? I asked. Her eyes widened. She fumbled for her phone, typing frantically. The color drained from her face as she stared at the screen. He emptied them, she whispered. Everything. Even my personal savings is gone. Marcus cursed under his breath. When yesterday morning, right after he said he was leaving for a Chicago meeting, she looked up, devastation in her eyes. There was over $200,000. The conference room fell silent as the implications sank in. Zachary hadn't just betrayed me. He'd betrayed everyone. "I'll contact the bank," Samuel said, reaching for the phone. "We might be able to reverse the transfers if we act quickly." While he made the call, Marcus turned to me, his businessman facade cracking slightly. "Mrs. Cooper, it appears we've both been deceived by the same individual. I propose we set aside adversarial positions and cooperate to resolve this situation. Translation, help me get my money back, and I'll help you get your house back." "I'm listening," I said cautiously. "The evidence your attorney has gathered, combined with what Olivia discovered, presents a compelling fraud case. If we file jointly, it strengthens both our positions." He leaned forward. "And it increases the chances of recovering the funds Zachary has absconded with." "And the house," I pressed, "returns to you." "Of course. The sale was fraudulent. That's indisputable now." I glanced at Eleanor, who gave me a slight nod, then at Olivia, who looked shell-shocked, her perfect world crumbling around her. "Agreed," I said. "With one condition." Marcus raised an eyebrow. "Which is, Olivia vacates my house immediately. Today, I want my home back." Olivia's head snapped up. "Where am I supposed to go?" "Back to your father's house, I presume," I said, not unkindly. "Where you lived before the wedding," Marcus nodded curtly. "That's acceptable. Olivia will remove her personal belongings today. Nothing more." Samuel returned, looking grim. "The funds were transferred to an offshore account yesterday. It's going to take court orders and international cooperation to freeze them, and even then—" "He's gone," Olivia said flatly. "Isn't he—" "He took the money and ran." No one answered. We didn't need to. The truth hung in the air like smoke. My son, the man I'd raised, had stolen from his mother, his wife, and his father-in-law, then disappeared with the proceeds. Part of me had expected this. Zachary had always taken the easy way out, avoided consequences, blamed others, but the scale of this betrayal still staggered me. "What now?" Eleanor asked, breaking the heavy silence. Samuel straightened his papers. "Now we file an amended complaint naming Zachary as the sole defendant. Reynolds Investment Trust becomes a co-plaintiff seeking restitution. We pursue both civil and criminal charges." "Criminal," Olivia's voice cracked. "Fraud, forgery, theft, elder abuse." Samuel listed dispassionately. "Depending on the jurisdiction, he's looking at 5-10 years if convicted on all counts." She buried her face in her hands. I felt a surprising surge of sympathy. She was young, naive perhaps, possibly complicit in parts of the scheme, but now she too was a victim. "Olivia," I said gently, "how much did you really know?" She looked up, mascara smudged beneath her eyes. "I knew the house was a big deal for Dad's company. I knew Zachary promised to deliver it. But I thought—" She swallowed hard. "I thought you'd agreed, that you were downsizing anyway. That's what he told everyone." Marcus placed a hand on his daughter's shoulder. "We'll sort this out. For now, let's focus on damage control." Damage control. Such a clinical term for the wreckage of our lives. As the meeting concluded with agreements to share information and coordinate legal strategy, I felt strangely hollow. This wasn't victory. It was just aftermath. Outside in the hallway, as Marcus made calls and Samuel conferred with his paralegal, Olivia approached me hesitantly. "I am sorry," she said, her composure cracking. "I should have asked questions, should have insisted on meeting you properly. I trusted him." "We both did," I said. "That's the hardest part." She nodded, blinking back tears. "I'll have everything out of the house by evening. Is there anything special I should be careful with?" The question caught me off guard, this small consideration after so much thoughtlessness. "The china cabinet in the dining room," I said. "Some of those pieces were my grandmother's, and the quilt on the guest bed, I made that when I was expecting Zachary." "I'll be careful," she promised. And I'll leave the keys with your lawyer." As she turned to go, I found myself saying, "Olivia, this isn't your fault. Not entirely." She looked back, a sad smile touching her lips. "Isn't it I married a man I barely knew because he promised to solve my family's problems? I overlooked red flags because I wanted security. I didn't question where the money came from as long as it benefited me." She shook her head. Maybe I deserve this wake-up call. After she left with her father, Eleanor and I sat in Samuel's waiting room, processing the morning's revelations. "Well," Eleanor said finally, "that was not how I expected this meeting to go." "Nothing about this situation is what I expected," I replied. "My son stealing my house, then stealing his wife's money and disappearing. It's like a bad movie." Eleanor squeezed my hand. "But the house is coming back to you. That's something." "Yes," I agreed, though the victory felt hollow. "That's something." Later that afternoon, Samuel called to confirm that Olivia had indeed vacated the property. The keys were at his office, ready for me to collect. "There's one more thing," he added. "A letter came to my office, addressed to you, postmarked yesterday from Chicago." My heart skipped. "From Zachary. The return address matches his business office. Do you want me to open it?" "No," I said after a moment's consideration. "I'll read it myself tomorrow." That night, I lay awake in Eleanor's guest room, wondering what the letter might contain. Excuses, apologies, more lies, and wondering, too, about the house I'd be returning to. Would it still feel like home after all that had happened? Or was it just a structure now, its emotional resonance tainted by betrayal? Tomorrow would bring answers, but not, I suspected, peace. Not yet. Samuel's office was quiet that morning, sunlight streaming through the blinds and dusty ribbons. The envelope sat on his desk between us, my name written in Zachary's familiar, hurried handwriting. "Would you like some privacy?" Samuel asked. I nodded, and he stepped out, closing the door softly behind him. For a long moment, I just stared at the envelope. Part of me wanted to tear it open immediately. Another part wanted to burn it unread. What could Zachary possibly say that would justify what he'd done? Finally, I slid my finger under the flap and pulled out a single sheet of paper. "Mom, by the time you read this, I'll be gone. Don't bother looking. You always thought I was a failure, and now I've proven you right. The house was just sitting there, empty value that you refused to tap into. I needed it. Olivia's family needed it. You never understood what it's like to be drowning in expectations you can't meet. Maybe someday I'll send money to make up for it. Maybe not. Either way, we're done. No apology, no remorse, just blame and self-pity." I folded the letter carefully and returned it to the envelope. A strange calm settling over me. The last lingering doubt that perhaps there had been some misunderstanding, some explanation that might partially absolve him, was gone. My son had chosen his path. When Samuel returned, I handed him the letter without comment. He read it quickly, his expression darkening. "This doesn't help his case." "No," I agreed quietly. "But it clarifies mine, meaning I want to press charges, all of them, fraud, forgery, elder abuse, whatever applies, and I want it on record." Samuel nodded slowly. "I'll start the paperwork. But Marilyn, you should know even with charges filed, finding him might be difficult. If he's left the country..." "I understand, but I need to do this, not for revenge, for accountability, for the truth to be officially acknowledged, for the record to show that what happened to me was wrong, that I fought back." As I left Samuel's office, letter tucked into my purse, my phone buzzed with a text from Eleanor. Court document arrived. Hearing moved up to tomorrow. Judge Hannigan, 9 a.m. Things were moving faster now, momentum building. Tomorrow I would face a judge and formally begin the process of reclaiming my home. But first, I needed to see it. "Are you sure this is a good idea?" Eleanor asked as she drove me across town toward Maple Street. "It might be upsetting to see what they've done to the place." "I need to know," I said simply. "Need to see it with my own eyes." She sighed but didn't argue further. As we turned onto my street, The familiar row of oak trees welcomed me home. Houses I'd known for decades lined the road, the Pattersons with their always perfect lawn, the Mendezes with their cheerful garden gnomes, old Mr. Collins who still hand-washed his vintage Cadillac every Sunday. And then, my house, my home. The for sale sign was gone, but something else was missing too, the warmth, the sense of belonging. It looked smaller somehow, diminished. Eleanor parked across the street. "Want me to come with you?" I shook my head. "Just wait here. I won't be long." Using my cane for support, I made my way slowly up the front walk, painfully aware of curious neighbors watching from behind curtains. The gravel crunched beneath my feet, just as it always had. The porch steps creaked in the same places. The key slid into the lock, and the door swung open. I stepped inside, into the foyer where I'd greeted guests for 40 years, where Zachary had taken his first steps, where Robert and I had slow danced on our 25th anniversary when our stereo played our wedding song while we were decorating the Christmas tree. The smell hit me first, unfamiliar perfume mingled with furniture polish. Then the visual changes. My comfortable old sofa was gone, replaced by a sleek modern sectional. The walls, once warm beige, had been painted stark white. Family photos removed, replaced by generic abstract art. In just weeks, they had begun erasing me. I moved through the house like a ghost, noting each alteration with a detached sort of grief. The kitchen had new appliances, the dining room, new lighting fixtures. My bedroom, Robert's, and my sanctuary had been transformed into a home office. Our old bed nowhere to be seen. Only Zachary's childhood bedroom remained untouched, as if they hadn't decided what to do with it yet. His old baseball trophies still lined the shelves. The constellation map still hung on the ceiling. Stars faded after decades of watching over him. I sat on the edge of his twin bed, running my hand over the faded Star Wars comforter he'd insisted on keeping well into his teens. Had I gone wrong here? Failed him somehow in this very room? The front door opened, and Eleanor's voice called out. "Marilyn, you okay? You've been in here a while." "In here," I replied, my voice steadier than I expected. She appeared in the doorway, concern etched on her face. "Oh, honey, they changed everything," I said. "Except this room, like they couldn't decide whether to erase him too." Eleanor sat beside me on the narrow bed. "People like that, they're always running from something, changing things to feel in control." She patted my hand. "But they can't change what matters. The memories, the foundation, the love that built this place that's still here." I nodded, taking a deep breath. "Yes, and tomorrow, it will be mine again." As we prepared to leave, I took one last look at Zachary's room. Then I did something I'd never done before. I closed the door firmly, decisively. Some chapters need to end before new ones can begin. That evening, back at Eleanor's, we prepared for court. I laid out my navy suit, the one I'd worn to Robert's funeral, now slightly loose after weeks of hospital food and stress. Eleanor pressed it meticulously while I reviewed notes with Samuel over the phone. "Judge Hannigan is fair but formal," he advised. "Answer questions directly. Don't elaborate unless asked. And remember, this is just a preliminary hearing to establish temporary control of the property until the full case is resolved." "Will they be there?" I asked. "The Reynolds, Marcus and his attorney." "Yes, Olivia is not required to attend." "And no sign of Zachary?" Samuel hesitated. "Nothing yet, but the bank has some leads on the transfers. International accounts in Belize and Panama. The authorities are involved now." After we hung up, Eleanor brought me a cup of chamomile tea. "Everything's set for tomorrow." "As ready as I'll ever be," I said, accepting the warm mug gratefully. We sat in comfortable silence, the weight of tomorrow's hearing hanging between us. "What will you do?" Eleanor asked finally. "When you get the house back?" It was a question I'd been avoiding. The house no longer felt like the home I remembered. Too much had changed, both in the physical space and in my heart. "I don't know," I admitted. "Live there, I suppose. Reclaim it somehow. Or sell it," Eleanor suggested gently. On your terms this time. Start fresh somewhere without those memories. The thought had occurred to me too, but it felt like surrendering somehow, like letting Zachary win. One step at a time, I say. First I get it back, then I decide what to do with it. That night, I dreamed of the house again, not as it was now, or even as it had been when Zachary was young, but as it might be, walls repainted in warm colors, new furniture, chosen by me. Grandchildren I'd never met running through hallways filled with light and laughter. A future, not just a past. I woke feeling strangely hopeful, despite everything. Court day dawned clear and bright. I dressed carefully, applied minimal makeup, and pulled my silver hair into a neat bun. The woman in the mirror looked older than I remembered, but her eyes were clear and determined. "You look formidable," Eleanor declared, adjusting my collar. "Like a woman who doesn't take nonsense from anyone." Samuel met us at the courthouse, briefcase in hand, expression confident. "Good news," he said as we walked toward the courtroom. "The bank has successfully frozen one of the offshore accounts. About half the money Zachary took from Olivia has been secured. And the other half, still tracking it. But this is progress." Inside the courtroom, Marcus Reynolds and his attorney were already seated at one table. Marcus nodded stiffly when he saw me, his expression unreadable. Samuel guided me to the other table, helping me arrange my cane against the chair before setting out his documents with practiced precision. "All rise," the bailiff called, and Judge Hannigan entered a stern-looking woman in her 60s with silver-rimmed glasses and an air of no-nonsense efficiency. What followed was simultaneously more straightforward and more emotional than I had anticipated. Samuel presented our case concisely: the expired power of attorney, the forged documents, the trust provisions that invalidated the transfer. Marcus's attorney largely concurred. Admitting that Reynolds Investment Trust had entered the transaction in good faith, but now recognized the sale as fraudulent. "Given the defendant's apparent flight and the evidence of forgery," Judge Hannigan said, "I'm issuing a temporary order returning possession of the property at 1487 Maple Street to Mrs. Cooper, effective immediately. The funds from the fraudulent sale will remain frozen pending final resolution. Mr. Reynolds, your company's claim for restitution will be addressed in the full hearing." She looked directly at me. "Mrs. Cooper, while this grants you immediate possession, I advise against making any permanent changes to the property until the final hearing. Are we clear?" "Yes, Your Honor," I replied, voice steady despite the emotion welling in my throat. "Very well. We're adjourned until the full hearing next month." As simple as that. My home was mine again. Outside the courtroom, Marcus approached, his attorney hovering nearby. "Mrs. Cooper," he said formally, "I want to reiterate that had I known the circumstances, I never would have proceeded with the purchase." "I believe you," I said. "Your mistake was trusting my son, as was mine." A flicker of something understanding perhaps crossed his face. "My legal team will continue cooperating with the authorities to locate him and recover the stolen funds." "Thank you." He hesitated, then added, "Olivia asked me to tell you she's sorry for everything." I nodded, accepting the apology for what it was imperfect, second-hand, but sincere. As he walked away, Eleanor appeared at my side. "Ready to go home?" she asked. Home, such a complicated word now. "Yes," I said. "I think I am." Samuel handed me the new keys in the courthouse parking lot. "The locks were changed yesterday, as you requested." The small metal keys felt heavy in my palm, symbols of reclamation, of boundaries restored. "Thank you, Samuel, for everything." He smiled, genuine warmth breaking through his professional demeanor. "You're a remarkable woman, Marilyn. Most people would have crumbled under this kind of betrayal. You fought back." "I had help," I said, glancing at Eleanor. "Well, my part is mostly done for now. The criminal complaint has been filed. The property is legally yours again. We'll have the final hearing in a few weeks, but that's largely a formality at this point." As he walked toward his car, I called after him. "Samuel, The money Zachary took from Olivia. From their accounts, what happens to that? He turned back. That's between them. Legally, as his wife, she has claim to marital assets, but given the circumstances and his disappearance. It's complicated, I finished for him. Life usually is, he agreed with a slight smile. Eleanor drove me to my house once more. This time, we didn't park across the street. We pulled right into the driveway, where I belonged. Want me to come in? She asked. Actually, I said slowly, I think I need to do this alone, but can you come back in a couple of hours? Bring some dinner. She squeezed my hand. You got it. Chinese or pizza? Chinese from Golden Dragon, the usual extra sweet and sour sauce on the side. You call if you need anything before then. Anything at all. Arthur Godfrey's on TV Land at 4 if you want to feel nostalgic. I smiled at the reference to the old variety show we both remembered from our youth. I'll keep that in mind. I watched her drive away, then turned to face the house. My house. Mine again. The new key slid smoothly into the lock. The door opened with the same familiar creak, one that Robert had always promised to fix but never got around to. I stepped inside, into the foyer where so much had happened, and let the door close behind me. Silence embraced me, not the hostile silence of an invaded space, but the welcoming quiet of a place finally at rest. I moved through the room slowly, not as a visitor this time, but as the rightful owner. In the living room, I removed the generic art from the walls, stacking the canvases in a corner. In the kitchen, I ran my hand over the new appliances. They were nice. Actually, I might keep those. The old refrigerator had been making that rattling sound for years. Upstairs, I paused outside Zachary's childhood bedroom. The door remained closed, just as I'd left it yesterday. I decided to leave it that way for now. In the master bedroom, my bedroom, I surveyed the office setup with a critical eye. The desk would have to go. The filing cabinets, too. I wanted my bed back, my sanctuary. As I made mental notes for restoring each space, I realized something important. I wasn't trying to recreate the past. I was imagining a future, my future, in this house that had seen so much life. I made my way to the basement door, grateful that my knee had healed enough for stairs. Taking them slowly, one at a time, I descended into the cool darkness and found the light switch. The basement had been untouched. Apparently, Zachary and Olivia hadn't made it this far in their renovation plans, and there, against the far wall, were the storage boxes neatly labeled in my handwriting. Christmas decorations, photo albums, Robert's things, and beside them, draped in an old sheet, the outline of our bed, the queen-sized oak frame that Robert had insisted on buying for our 10th anniversary. A solid bed for a solid marriage, he'd said, ever the romantic behind his practical exterior. I pulled the sheet back, revealing the headboard with its simple, elegant carvings. Dust had settled on the wood, but otherwise, it was perfect. Waiting. Something loosened in my chest. Not everything had been erased. Some things had just been hidden away, waiting to be rediscovered. I spent the next hour opening boxes, reacquainting myself with treasures I'd thought lost. Robert's collection of vintage baseball cards from the 50s, our wedding album with its slightly faded color photos, the hand-knit baby blanket that had once wrapped newborn Zachary, a gift from my mother who'd passed long before Robert. When Eleanor arrived with dinner, she found me sitting on the basement steps, surrounded by open boxes, tear tracks drying on my cheeks. "Oh no," she said, alarmed. "What's wrong?" I smiled up at her. "Nothing's wrong. I found my things. They didn't throw them away. They just stored them." She set the food bags down and looked around at the scattered memorabilia. "Well, isn't that something? Small mercies, I suppose." "More than that," I said, rising with only a slight wince from my healing knee. "It's a sign." "Of what?" "That the past isn't gone. It's just waiting to be integrated into the present." Eleanor rolled her eyes affectionately. "Always the philosopher. Come on, the food's getting cold, and I'm starving. You can wax poetic after we eat." We ate in the kitchen, perched on bar stools at the new granite counter. Eleanor had brought a bottle of white wine, and we toasted to new beginnings. "So," she said between bites of kung pao chicken, "what's the plan? Restoration, renovation, revolution?" I laughed. "A bit of all three, I think. Keep what works, change what doesn't. Make it mine again, but differently." "Need a roommate?" she asked casually. "My place is getting too big for just me. The arthritis makes the stairs a challenge." The offer caught me by surprise. Eleanor and I had been friends for decades, but living together was something we'd never discussed. "Are you serious?" She shrugged, trying to look nonchalant but not quite pulling it off. "Why not?" "We're both alone. Houses are expensive to maintain. And frankly, after all this, I don't like the idea of you rattling around here by yourself." I considered it. Having Eleanor here would change things, certainly, but maybe change was exactly what this house needed. New energy, new memories. "Let me think about it," I said. "It's not a bad idea." "No pressure," she assured me. "Just an option. I'm not getting any younger. And neither are you. Those AARP commercials about seniors living together make a lot of sense these days." After dinner, we walked through the house together, planning what furniture to move first, what walls to repaint, what fixtures to replace. "You know what this place needs," Eleanor said as we stood in the too-white living room. "Color, life. It looks like a hospital now." "You're right," I agreed. "I'm thinking warm yellows, maybe some terracotta, colors with some life to them." "Perfect. And plants. Lots of plants, like we had back in the 70s. Remember your spider plant that took over the dining room?" How could I forget Robert called it the Day of the Triffids? We were still discussing possibilities when the doorbell rang. We exchanged puzzled glances. No one knew I was back in the house yet. I approached the door cautiously and peered through the peephole. My breath caught. Olivia stood on the porch, arms wrapped around herself as if cold. Though the evening was mild, I opened the door slowly. "Olivia." "Mrs. Cooper," she said, her voice small. "I hope I'm not intruding." "That depends on why you're here." She looked down at her feet, then back up, meeting my eyes with what seemed like genuine effort. "I came to return something that belongs to you." From her purse, she withdrew a small velvet box, and my heart skipped as I recognized it, my mother's jewelry box, the one that had sat on my dresser for decades. "I took it when we were leaving," she admitted. "I shouldn't have. It clearly wasn't part of the house furnishings." I accepted the box wordlessly, opening it to find my mother's pearl earrings and the sapphire pendant Robert had given me on our 20th anniversary. "Thank you," I said finally. "This means a lot to me." She nodded, turning to go, but I found myself calling after her. "Olivia, would you like to come in just for a moment?" Surprise flickered across her face, followed by uncertainty. "Are you sure?" "Yes," I said, surprised to find I meant it. Eleanor raised an eyebrow as Olivia stepped into the foyer, but didn't object. She simply said, "I'll make some tea," and disappeared into the kitchen. I led Olivia to the living room, where we sat on opposite ends of the modern sectional that still dominated the space. "How are you doing?" I asked. She let out a humorless laugh. "Honestly terrible. Divorced after 3 weeks of marriage. Back living with my parents, trying to explain to everyone why my husband disappeared with our money." She twisted her hands in her lap. "But I'm not here for sympathy." "Why are you here?" "Olivia, besides returning the jewelry," she took a deep breath, "to apologize properly, face to face. What happened to you was wrong. I was part of it. Even if I didn't know the full extent, I should have asked questions, should have insisted on meeting you, should have wondered why everything felt so rushed." I studied her, this young woman who had been so eager to claim my house, my son, a future built on shaky foundations. There was genuine regret in her eyes now, and something else, a new wariness. Perhaps lessons learned the hard way. "We all should have done things differently," I said finally. "Me included." Eleanor returned with 3 mugs of tea, settling herself in the armchair across from us with an expression that clearly said she wasn't missing this conversation. "Have you heard from him?" I asked. "Since he left," Olivia shook her head. Nothing. The police think he might be in Costa Rica. Something about credit card traces. She hesitated. Have you? No, I said. Just the letter he left, blaming everyone but himself. Classic Zachary, she murmured, then looked up, alarmed. I'm sorry, that was accurate, I finished for her. Painfully so. A ghost of a smile touched her lips. You know, in another life, one where your son wasn't a con artist and my father wasn't desperate to save his company, I think we might have gotten along. We still might, I found myself saying. Not as family, perhaps, but as people who've survived the same storm. She blinked rapidly, fighting tears. I'd like that. After she left, Eleanor turned to me with raised eyebrows. Well, that was unexpected. Everything about this situation has been unexpected, I said, closing the door. I'm learning to roll with it. That night, I slept in the guest room, on sheets Olivia had left behind. The master bedroom would have to wait until my own bed was brought up from the basement. But even in this in-between state, in this house that was both familiar and strange, I slept more soundly than I had in weeks. I was home. Not the same home, but home nonetheless. The weeks that followed settled into a rhythm of reclamation and renewal. Eleanor brought over my clothes and personal items from her house. Together, we repainted the living room a warm butterscotch yellow, rehung family photos, and arranged furniture keeping some of the new pieces, bringing back some of my old favorites. My bed was restored to the master bedroom, freshly polished and adorned with new linens. The modern appliances stayed in the kitchen, but my collection of hand-painted mugs returned to the open shelving, room by room. The house transformed not back to what it had been, but into something new, something that honored the past while embracing the present. Through it all, Zachary's room remained closed. I wasn't ready to face that space yet, to decide what to do with the remnants of my son's childhood while he was still running from the consequences of his actions. 1 month after reclaiming the house, I received a call from Samuel. They've located him, he said without preamble. Zachary, he's in Panama. My heart stuttered. Have they arrested him? Not yet. There are extradition complications, but they've frozen his remaining assets. He won't get far. I sank into a kitchen chair, emotions swirling relief, sadness, a strange sense of closure. What happens now? That's partly up to you, Samuel said carefully. The criminal charges are proceeding regardless. But if you wanted to speak with him before things escalate further, is that possible? The authorities have his local number. They're willing to facilitate a call, given the circumstances. I closed my eyes, imagining that conversation. What would I say to the son who had betrayed me so completely? What could he possibly say in return? I need to think about it, I told Samuel, after hanging up. I sat in the kitchen for a long time, watching the afternoon light shift across the newly painted walls. Then I called Eleanor. If you could talk to him, she asked after I explained the situation. What would you say? I don't know, I admitted. Part of me wants to ask why. Another part doesn't want to hear his excuses. Do you need closure, Marilyn, or do you already have it? That was the question. Wasn't it in reclaiming my house, in rebuilding my life? Had I already found the resolution I needed? I think, I said slowly. I need to hear his voice one more time. Not for him. For me. The next day, with arrangements made through proper channels, I sat in Samuel's office waiting for the international call to connect. Samuel had offered to step out, but I asked him to stay. I wanted a witness, someone objective to hear whatever might be said. The phone rang once, twice, 3 times. Then, hello, Zachary's voice, slightly distorted by distance but unmistakable, the same voice that had once called me Mommy and asked for bedtime stories, now wary and defensive. Zachary, I said, my own voice steadier than I expected. It's Mom. A pause, then defensive immediately. Did they tell you where I am? Are the police there? No greeting. No how are you? Just self-preservation, as always. I'm at my lawyer's office, I said. And yes, I know you're in Panama. The authorities know too. He cursed softly. Look, I don't have much time. What do you want? What did I want? The question echoed in my mind. To understand, to forgive, to condemn. I want to understand, I said finally. Why, Zachary, why did you do this? He sighed, a burst of static over the line. Does it matter now? It's done. It matters to me. Another pause, longer this time. Then, grudgingly, I needed the money. Olivia's dad was pressuring us. Said if I could bring assets to the table, he'd give me a position in the company, executive level. Finally, a chance to be somebody. You were already somebody, I said quietly. You were my son. Yeah, well, that wasn't enough. Was it Dad's golden boy who never quite measured up? The disappointment, the failure, the bitterness in his voice shocked me. Is that how you saw yourself? Because it's not how I saw you? Really? Then why did you stop helping me? Why did you say no when I needed that loan last year? Because it was the 5th loan. Zachary, because you never paid back the others. Because throwing money at problems doesn't solve them. Easy for you to say, he muttered. Your life was set. The house was paid off. You had savings. What did I have? Opportunities. I said education, support, everything we could give you. Not everything, he snapped. Not Dad's approval, not your unconditional backing when I needed it most. I took a deep breath, recognizing the conversation was spiraling into old patterns. This wasn't why I had called. Zachary, listen to me. What you did was wrong, not just legally, but morally. You stole from me. You forged documents. You took advantage of my trust. I know, he said, surprising me. Okay, I know it was wrong, but I was desperate. And now are you still desperate? Hiding in Panama with stolen money? He didn't answer immediately. When he did, his voice was quieter. I messed up. I get that. But I can't go back now. They'll arrest me. Yes, I agreed. They probably will. Actions have consequences. Zachary, even for you. So that's it, you're writing me off, your only child. The manipulation was so transparent it almost made me laugh. Almost. No, Zachary, you wrote me off when you decided my home, my possessions, my very autonomy were yours to take. When you believed that your desires trumped my rights. Mom, I'm not finished, I said firmly. I want you to know something. I got the house back. I'm living there now, making it mine again. I've filed charges against you, and I won't be withdrawing them. What happens next is up to the authorities and the courts. You're really going to let them put me in jail? His voice cracked, a glimpse of genuine fear breaking through the bravado. I'm going to let justice take its course, I said, because I love you enough to believe you need to face consequences. That's what real love looks like, sometimes not protecting someone from the results of their choices, but allowing them to learn from them. Silence stretched between us, thousands of miles and immeasurable emotional distance. Is that all? He asked finally, his voice flat. One more thing, I said. I forgive you, he scoffed. Right. Not for your sake, I clarified. For mine. Carrying anger and betrayal is too heavy a burden, so I'm setting it down. What you do with that forgiveness, whether you earn it, whether you value it, that's your choice. I could hear him breathing, could almost picture him pacing in some rented Panamanian apartment, trapped by his own decisions. Goodbye, Zachary, I said softly. I hope someday you find your way back, not to me, not to the house, but to yourself, to the person you could have been. I hung up before he could respond, before he could try one more manipulation, one more excuse. Samuel, who had remained silent throughout the call, looked at me with something like admiration. You did well, he said. Better than most would have. I said what I needed to say, I replied. Whether he heard it or not, that's beyond my control. As I left the office, I felt lighter somehow. Not happy, exactly. The situation was still tragic, the losses still real, But the conversation had given me something I hadn't realized I needed: not closure, but clarity. My son had made his choices. I had made mine. And now we would both live with the results. The final hearing came and went with little drama. Judge Hannigan ruled officially what had already been put in motion: the house was mine, the fraudulent sale void, the criminal charges against Zachary proceeding through proper channels. Marcus Reynolds attended, nodding formally to me across the courtroom. His company had recovered most of the money through insurance claims and legal action against Zachary's remaining assets. Our paths would likely never cross again. Olivia was there too, sitting quietly in the back. She approached me afterward, looking more grounded than I remembered, less polished but somehow more substantial. "It's over then," she said. "Legally, at least." "Yes," I agreed. "Though I suspect the emotional part takes longer." She smiled faintly. "I'm learning that, day by day." "What will you do now?" I asked, genuinely curious. "Start over. I'm going back to school. Actually, law school." She shrugged at my surprised expression. This whole experience, it made me want to understand the system better, maybe help others who've been taken advantage of. "That's unexpected and admirable." "Well, I had an example of standing up for oneself even when it's difficult." She glanced away, then back. "Would it be okay if I called you sometimes not as family, just as, I don't know, someone who understands?" I thought about it for a moment, then nodded. "I'd like that." 2 months after reclaiming my house, I stood in front of Zachary's closed bedroom door. It was time. Eleanor stood beside me, solid and supportive as always. She had moved in 3 weeks earlier, taking the guest room as her own, filling the house with her boisterous laughter and strong opinions. It worked, this unconventional arrangement. We gave each other space when needed, company when desired, and a sense of security that living alone couldn't provide. "Ready?" she asked. I nodded and turned the knob. The room was exactly as I'd left it that day, frozen in time, a monument to the boy Zachary had been. Baseball trophies, science fair ribbons, posters of bands long since disbanded. "What will you do with it all?" Eleanor asked. I moved to the window, drawing back the curtains to let sunlight stream in after months of darkness. Dust motes danced in the golden beams. "Some things I'll keep," I said, touching a framed photo of Zachary at his high school graduation, eyes bright with promise. "Some I'll let go. And the room itself, I think it's time for a change." "What kind of change?" I turned, surveying the space with new eyes. "Something forward-looking. Maybe an art studio. I've always wanted to try painting." Eleanor smiled. "I can see that. Good light, quiet space, room for an easel by the window." "And you?" I asked. "Any rooms you'd like to transform?" She considered. "That formal dining room we never use. Could make a nice library. Bookshelves along the walls. Comfortable reading chairs." "Perfect," I agreed. "This house has room for both our dreams." Later that day, as we sorted through Zachary's belongings, creating piles to keep, donate, or store, I found his childhood journal tucked behind the dresser. The lock had long since broken, the pages yellowed with age. I hesitated, respecting the privacy of the boy he had been, yet seeking understanding of the man he had become. In the end, I placed it unopened in the keep box. Some mysteries were better left unexplored. Some answers wouldn't change the questions that mattered. That evening, we sat on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of amber and rose. Eleanor had hung wind chimes from the eaves. Their gentle melody carried on the evening breeze. "Do you think he'll ever come back?" she asked, breaking the comfortable silence. "Zachary." I considered the question, watching a pair of cardinals flit among the maple branches. "I don't know. The authorities are still looking for him. Even if he evades them, facing his actions would require a kind of courage I'm not sure he has. And if he did come back, then we'd have to find a new way forward," I said. "Not as we were, but as we are now." Eleanor nodded, understanding. "In the meantime, I smiled, raising my glass in a toast. In the meantime, we live, we create, we move forward. She clinked her glass against mine. To moving forward, and to this house, I added. Not just a structure of wood and stone, but a home again, filled with friendship, honesty, and second chances. As twilight deepened around us, I felt a sense of peace settle over me like a familiar blanket. The betrayal still hurt. The loss was still real, but they no longer defined me. What defined me now was resilience, the strength to rebuild, the wisdom to cherish what remained and let go of what was lost. My son had tried to take my house, thinking it was just property. But in doing so, he'd given me something unexpected, the chance to reclaim not just my home, but myself. And that was a foundation no one could ever steal away. What would you do if you were in my place? Have you ever been through something similar? Comment below. If you enjoyed my story, check out 2 other channel favorites. My daughter-in-law said I was too old to babysit my grandchildren, and after 40 years of marriage, my husband left me for his secretary.